What is the real reason you don't have any friends? Story 1. I never really figured out the balance with people. Either I give too much and they walk all over me, or I pull back to protect myself and end up coming across as distant or uncaring. When I was younger, I wanted so badly to fit in, but my family kept moving around, and each new start felt like more effort than it was worth. By the time I settled in one place, I'd already learned to rely on myself, and that hasn't changed much. Friendships always start strong, but over time they demand things I'm not good at giving. Constant check-ins, emotional availability, shared hobbies I don't even enjoy. The truth is, I like people in theory, but in practice they're exhausting. Even when I meet someone I click with, I second-guess myself into silence. What if they think I'm weird? What if they don't really like me? I overthink every interaction until I convince myself they'd be better off without me. Now I stick to my routines, work, hobbies, and the rare moments of company I share with my dog. He's the only one I trust not to complicate things. Some days I feel the loneliness creeping in, but mostly I tell myself it's better this way. No drama, no expectations, no disappointments. Story 2. I'm not good at small talk, and I've never been great at pretending to be interested in things that bore me. That's probably why most of my friendships fall apart before they even really begin. I try to engage when the topic is interesting, but as soon as someone starts droning on about a hobby I don't care about or their latest office drama, I mentally check out. I've always been better at being alone. Social settings overwhelm me. Too many people, too many conversations I'm supposed to keep up with. Add my social anxiety to the mix, and I'm basically a disaster in any group situation. It's easier to stay home where I don't have to fake a smile or think about whether I'm coming across as rude. I've had friends in the past who tried to include me in their plans, but I'd bail so many times they eventually stopped asking. It's not that I don't care. I really do. I just don't know how to show it in a way that doesn't feel forced. At this point, most people probably think I don't like them, but the truth is, I don't even like myself enough to believe anyone else could. Story 3. I think the reason I don't have any friends anymore is that I've changed too much. When I was younger, I was this bright, bubbly, optimistic person who loved being around people. I had friends everywhere, school, work, online. But life has a way of hardening you. I've been through things, losses, betrayals, heartbreaks, that have made me more guarded. I've become cynical, skeptical of people's motives, and honestly kind of bitter. I used to trust easily, but now I question everything. When someone is nice to me, my first thought is, what do they want? I don't like that about myself, but it's where I'm at. I've tried reconnecting with old friends, but it's awkward. I feel like I'm a completely different person now, and I don't know how to explain that to them. And making new friends? Forget it. I can barely muster the energy to get through a day, let alone build a relationship from scratch. So I spend most of my time alone. I tell myself I'm fine with it, that I don't need anyone. But deep down, I miss the old me. I miss the version of myself who believed in people, who believed in connection, who wasn't so tired all the time. Story 4. I think the real reason I don't have any friends is that I stopped trying after being let down so many times. Growing up, I was the reliable one, always there to help, to listen, to give whatever I had without expecting much in return. But over time, I realized people only came to me when they needed something. Emotional support, a ride, help moving. It never felt mutual. I was the giver, and they were the takers. The worst part was realizing they didn't even notice how drained I was. They'd take what they needed and disappear until the next favor came up. Eventually, I hit a breaking point. I stopped answering calls, stopped making plans, stopped putting myself in situations where I felt used. The thing is, I thought it would feel empowering, but it mostly just feels empty. I see other people hanging out, having fun, and I wonder what it's like to have a friendship that doesn't feel like work. But then I remind myself of all the times I was burned, and it's easier to stay on my own. At least this way, I don't have to worry about being hurt again. Story 5. I've always been told I'm too intense. I guess that's part of the problem. I expect people to show up the way I do, to care deeply, to follow through, to make an effort, But they don't, and I take it personally every single time. It's not like I don't try. I've been the one planning things, checking in, making sure my friends are okay. But when the tables turn, when I need someone to lean on, it's like I don't exist. I can't count how many times I've been ghosted or brushed off by people I thought I was close to, so I've stopped putting myself out there. Now, when someone cancels plans or doesn't text back, I just let it go and tell myself I'm better off alone. It's hard, though. I miss the connection, the laughter, the sense of belonging. But every time I think about trying again, I remember how it feels to be left hanging, and I just can't do it. I'd rather be lonely on my own terms than risk being hurt again. Story 6. I've always been okay with being alone. I don't mind the quiet, the space to think, the freedom to do what I want without worrying about anyone else. But as I've gotten older, I've realized it's not just that I enjoy solitude, it's that I don't trust people. Too many times I've let someone get close only to be betrayed, lied to, or taken advantage of. It's like there's a part of me that shuts down the second someone tries to break through my walls. I'll be friendly, sure. I'll chat, I'll smile, I'll even share a joke or two. But when it comes to building something deeper, I can't do it. I always assume the worst. They're using me, they'll hurt me, they'll leave. And maybe that's unfair, but it's my reality. I've built my life around self-reliance, and while it's lonely at times, it's also safe. I don't have to worry about getting hurt if I don't let anyone in. Maybe one day I'll be brave enough to try again, but for now it's just me, and I'm learning to be okay with that. Story 7. I think I've always struggled with trust, but it's gotten worse as I've gotten older. When I was a kid, I was the shy one, the one who'd hang back at parties, who'd watch from the sidelines while everyone else played. It wasn't that I didn't want to join in, I just didn't know how. I thought it would get better as I grew up, but it hasn't. If anything, it's harder now. Somewhere along the way, I learned that people can be cruel. They lie, they betray you, they take advantage of your kindness. And after enough of those experiences, you start to guard yourself. You put up walls, you stop letting people in, you keep your distance. At least that's what I've done. I've become so good at isolating myself that even when I want to connect with someone, I don't know how. I'll think about texting someone or making plans, but then my brain kicks in with all these questions. What if they don't want to hear from me? What if they're too busy? What if they say yes but secretly wish they'd said no? It's exhausting, and most of the time I just give up before I even try. So I stay in my little bubble. It's safe here, but it's also lonely. Story 8. The thing about me is I don't think I've ever really belonged anywhere. I'm the kind of person who floats through social groups without ever truly fitting in. I'll meet someone, we'll hit it off, and for a while it feels like maybe, just maybe, I found my people. But then something happens. Maybe they make an offhand comment that cuts a little too deep. Maybe I notice they only call when they need something. Or maybe it's just me. Maybe I start overthinking things, questioning whether they really like me or if they're just tolerating me. Whatever it is, I pull back. I stop replying to texts. I make excuses to avoid hanging out, and before I know it, the friendship has fizzled out. It's a cycle I've repeated so many times I've lost count. And the worst part is I don't even know how to break it. I've convinced myself that I'm better off alone, but deep down I know that's not true. I want connection. I crave it. But I don't know how to hold on to it without losing myself in the process. So I stay in my little world, watching life happen from the sidelines, and wondering if this is just how it's going to be from now on. Story 9. I don't know when it started, but I think I've always had a hard time fitting in. It's not like I don't try. I'll put myself out there, make an effort to talk to people, but something always feels off, like I'm speaking a different language that no one else understands. Growing up, I chalked it up to being shy or awkward, but now I think it's more than that. Maybe it's the ADHD, or maybe I'm just wired differently. I get overwhelmed by social settings, overthink every word I say, and then beat myself up for not saying the right thing. Even when I'm with people I like, I feel like I'm performing, and it's exhausting. Over time, I've started to pull away. It's easier to be alone than to constantly worry about whether I'm annoying someone or not being enough. The loneliness gets to me sometimes, but at least when I'm by myself, I don't have to second-guess everything. Story 10. I think I just got tired of the game. Friendships feel like this constant balancing act. Don't be too clingy, but don't seem uninterested. Share enough, but not too much. Make plans, but don't be overbearing. It's exhausting. And no matter how hard I tried, it always seemed like I was the one putting in more effort. People would cancel last minute, ignore texts, or just disappear altogether. After a while, I stopped trying. Why bother when it feels so one-sided? Now, I spend most of my time alone. I focus on my work, my hobbies, and whatever makes me happy in the moment. I see people post online about their big friend groups or wild adventures, and part of me feels like I'm missing out. But then I remember how much drama and disappointment those relationships brought me, and I'm glad to be out of it. It's lonely, sure, but it's peaceful too. Story 11. I've always had this weird relationship with people. I like them, but I don't trust them. I'll get along fine with someone for a while, but as soon as they start asking for too much, emotional support, favors, time I don't have, I start pulling back. It's not that I don't care, it's just that I've been burned too many times. Friends who've lied to me, used me, ghosted me when I needed them most. It's like every time I let someone in, they give me a new reason to keep my guard up. So now I keep my distance. I tell myself it's better this way. No expectations, no disappointments. But there are nights when I sit at home, scrolling through my phone, and wonder if I'm doing the right thing. Am I protecting myself or just pushing people away before they even have a chance to hurt me? I don't know anymore. Story 12. The truth is, I used to be a people pleaser, and it burned me out completely. I'd go out of my way to make sure everyone around me was happy, helping with errands, lending money, listening to their problems, being the go-to person for every little crisis. At first, I thought that's what being a good friend was all about, but over time I started to notice something. The effort wasn't mutual. People would thank me, sure, but when it came to reciprocating, when I needed support or just someone to lean on, they were nowhere to be found. I'd get a half-hearted apology or some excuse about how busy they were, and then I'd watch as they gave their time and energy to someone else. It hurt more than I ever let on, and eventually, I stopped trying. I stopped making plans, stopped answering calls, stopped putting myself in situations where I felt like I was being taken advantage of. It felt empowering at first, like I was finally standing up for myself, but the flip side of that is that I cut myself off completely. Now I live a life that's quieter, simpler, but also lonelier. I miss the laughter, the connection, the sense of being part of something bigger than myself. But every time I think about opening up again, I'm reminded of all the times I was left behind, and I just can't. Story 13. I didn't start out this way. I used to be the person who was always there for everyone, the reliable friend, the one who would drop everything to help someone in need. But over time, I noticed a pattern. People would only call when they wanted something. Help moving, advice, a shoulder to cry on. And as soon as they got what they needed, they'd disappear. It started to feel like I was just a tool, not a friend. The worst part was realizing how little effort they put into the friendship compared to me. I got tired of it. I stopped reaching out, stopped bending over backward to make plans, or be there for people who clearly didn't value me. Now I have a few people I keep in touch with, but even that feels fragile sometimes. I spend most of my time alone, and while I miss the connection, I don't miss the feeling of being taken for granted. Story 14. I think I've always been a bit of a loner, but it didn't bother me until recently. Growing up, I was quiet and kept to myself. I had a few friends, but I never felt like I truly fit in. Now, as an adult, I realize I've never really learned how to connect with people. I'm not good at small talk, I don't like crowds, and I'd rather stay home than go out. The thought of making plans or keeping up with conversations feels overwhelming. On top of that, I overthink everything. Did I say something stupid? Do they secretly hate me? It's easier to just avoid the stress altogether. I tell myself I'm happy being alone, and most of the time I believe it. But every now and then, I wonder what it would be like to have someone I could really rely on. Someone who gets me. Maybe one day I'll figure it out, but for now, I'm fine in my little bubble. Story 15. I'm not sure when I started retreating into myself, but I think it's been building for years. When I was younger, I had friends, good ones even. We'd hang out, laugh, share secrets, and talk about anything and everything. But as life went on, things started to change. People moved, relationships shifted, and it became harder and harder to keep up. I think it was a slow realization that the effort to maintain those connections was draining me. Don't get me wrong, I like people. I really do. But liking people and keeping people are two entirely different things. I'd find myself forgetting to reply to texts, not because I didn't care, but because it felt like one more thing on my never-ending to-do list. Then days would turn into weeks, weeks into months, and suddenly I'd realize I hadn't spoken to someone in half a year. It's not that I don't think about them. I do. All the time. I just convince myself that they've moved on, that they don't need me anymore, or worse, that they think I don't need them. And so I bury myself in my work, my books, my hobbies. I tell myself that I'm content being alone, that I don't have the bandwidth for friendships right now. But every so often, I'll scroll through old photos or see a group of friends laughing together and feel this deep, hollow ache. I think about reaching out, but the thought of trying to explain why I disappeared feels too overwhelming, so I don't. I just sit with the loneliness and tell myself that this is easier, even if it doesn't always feel that way. Story 16. I think the hardest part about not having friends is realizing how much of it is my own doing. I don't mean to push people away, but it's like there's this invisible wall I've built around myself and I can't figure out how to take it down. I used to try so hard to be a good friend. I'd go out of my way to make plans, remember birthdays, check in when someone was going through a tough time. But over and over again, I'd find myself being the only one putting in the effort. People would forget about me until they needed something, and every time, it stung a little more. Eventually, I just stopped trying. I figured if they didn't care enough to meet me halfway, then what was the point? Now I spend most of my days alone. I'll scroll through social media and see people hanging out, laughing, having fun, and I feel this sharp pang of envy. But then I remind myself of how exhausting it was to keep up with friendships that felt one-sided, and I convince myself I'm better off. It's a strange kind of loneliness, wanting to be close to people, but being too scared to try again. Some days it feels like I've made peace with it. Other days it's all I can think about. Story 17. Growing up, I never really learned how to connect with people. My parents were strict, and I wasn't allowed to go to sleepovers or hang out after school unless they knew the other kids' families really well. By the time I hit high school, I'd given up trying. I'd sit by myself at lunch or hang out with a book, and while I didn't mind it back then, I realize now how much it shaped who I am. Even as an adult, I struggle to let people in. I'll have coworkers or acquaintances who seem interested in getting to know me, but I freeze up. What do I even say? How do I make small talk without sounding awkward or boring? And then there's the deeper stuff. The fear of being judged, the worry that I'll let someone down, or worse, that they'll let me down. So I retreat. I tell myself I'm fine on my own, that I don't need anyone, but there's a part of me that wonders what it would be like to have a group of friends I could count on. I see people planning trips, throwing parties, laughing together, and I can't help but feel like I missed the memo on how to do all that. I want to try, but it's hard to unlearn years of self-isolation. Story 18. If I had to sum up why I don't have friends, it's because I've always been bad at staying in touch. I don't mean to let people slip away. It just happens. Life gets busy, days turn into weeks, and before I know it, months have gone by without a single text or call. I'll think about reaching out, but then I feel guilty for taking so long, and that guilt makes it even harder to start the conversation. It's a vicious cycle. The thing is, I'm not great at balancing my energy. Socializing drains me, even with people I love, so I'll go through these phases where I just need to be alone for a while. But while I'm recharging, everyone else is moving on with their lives. By the time I'm ready to rejoin the world, it feels like I've been left behind. And honestly, I can't even blame them. Why would anyone stick around when I've done such a poor job of showing that I care? I miss the connections I used to have, but I don't know how to fix things without feeling like a burden. So I keep to myself, convincing myself it's easier this way, even if I know deep down that it's not. Story 19. I think my biggest problem is that I expect too much from people. I don't mean material things or constant attention, I just want effort. Genuine, mutual effort. I've had friends in the past who seemed great at first, but as time went on, it became clear they weren't interested in a two-way street. They'd cancel plans last minute, forget important things I told them, or only reach out when they needed something from me. It wore me down. I started questioning if I was doing something wrong, if I was too demanding or too sensitive. But then I realized it wasn't me. It was the way some people view friendships as optional, as something they can pick up and drop whenever it's convenient. I can't do that. If I care about someone, I'm all in. And maybe that's why I've ended up alone. I got tired of being the only one trying, so I stopped. I cut people off, stopped chasing after relationships that didn't feel equal. And now, here I am. I don't regret standing up for myself, but I do miss the idea of what those friendships could have been. It's a lonely kind of self-respect, and I'm still figuring out if it's worth it. Story 20. I've always felt like I see the world differently than most people. I overthink everything, analyze every word in a conversation, and notice little things that other people seem to overlook. It makes me great at understanding situations, but terrible at connecting with people. I can't just go with the flow in social settings. I'm always on edge, worrying about whether I'm coming across the right way or if I'm annoying someone without realizing it. The result? I hold back. I stay quiet when I want to speak up, I avoid plans even when I want to go, and I let relationships fade because I'm too scared to keep trying. On top of that, I have this deep distrust of people. I've been hurt before, lied to, used, abandoned, and it's made me question everyone's intentions. Even when someone seems genuine, I can't help but wonder when the other shoe will drop. So I keep my distance. I tell myself I'm protecting myself, but the truth is, I'm just scared. I want to believe there are people out there who wouldn't hurt me, who would understand me, but finding them feels impossible. For now, I stick to my routines, convincing myself that solitude is easier than disappointment, even if it's not what I really want.